Welcome to the Procurement Software Podcast, where we aim to educate and inspire you about how technology is changing and shaping our profession. The truth is, there's never been a more exciting time to be in procurement, but only if you're one of those organizations that's embracing the change and driving new developments. And this podcast is all about giving you the tools to help you get there. So buckle up and let's get right into this week's show. Yes, very warm welcome to another episode of the Procurement Software Podcast. This is August's episode, and I'm very happy to be joined today by a gentleman who's a bit of a unicorn, actually, because he's a procurement professional that also knows how to write Python code. And there are not many of those types of people out there, let me tell you. He's very active on LinkedIn for anyone that's on LinkedIn regularly, and often puts some real value bombs in there with a lot of controversial opinions thrown in there as well, which I'm sure we will dive into during the interview. So Gaurav Sharma from NTN and from Supernegotiate, warm welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Jim, thank you for having me. Big fan of your work. So always a pleasure to speak to you.
And I mean, we've chatted a few times on LinkedIn, and we've had a couple of calls, but we've never actually done one of these. So definitely long overdue. So just to set a bit of context, Gaurav, if you could walk me through a little bit, just a quick whistle-stop tour of your professional journey, of how you ended up in your current role as a category manager at MTN based in Dubai, I believe.
Yes, thank you. So I started my career back in 2008 as a procurement professional and rose to the rank. I handled a couple of categories as a buyer, went through all the operations management, and then started setting up Center of Excellence, I think starting to 2015 in Singapore, where I guess we started experimenting with machine learning at that point of time. So we started pretty early in 2015, combining procurement and data science together. And then I think we graduated in terms of the approaches. And today I think we are just scaling the same procurement and data science for MTN. So what started as a category manager role have now evolved into a Procurement Centre of Excellence or a setup kind of a role. That's basically in a nutshell. So in about 17 odd years of experience, I'm probably 10, 12 years into the core procurement buying, and then 5-6 years into core data science aspect.
Got it. So you mentioned that you have a bit of a data science background and that you can write Python code. What came first? Did you start in procurement and then learn data science on the job, or do you have a degree in computer science or data science?
No. So as I mentioned, I started as a core procurement category manager. So handled CAPEX, OPEX. I was in charge of leading the raw material procurement for my ex-company. 2015 is when I was put in charge of putting a Center of Excellence set up for procurement in Singapore. And that's where I started experimenting with, okay, what can I do to optimize my buying and set up our operations center in Singapore? And at that point of time, 2015, the machine learning was starting to get hot in terms of the trends, and I picked it up from there. So I do not have a computer science degree, but yeah, I started pretty early in terms of machine learning in 2015.
And that's a pretty rare combination of skills in procurement, isn't it? I mean, is there anyone else in your organization that has that sort of background as well, or are you the only one?
I have started seeing more and more now, but back then when I started, there was a clear segregation between tech side and procurement buying side. When you read so I'm a big fan of reading, right? So I do read about fiction, and then I also read a bit of academic stuff. So I went through this book of operations management, and there we learned equations and models around linear programming, how to optimize vendor shares, etc., etc. And that got me started in terms of, okay, let's start implementing these concepts. Now that we are in charge of putting together a Center of Excellence, how do I optimize my vendor share? And that got me started in terms of, let's use Python programming to optimize the spend, to automate my vendor shares and backtest some of the things that I'm trying to do on a day-to-day basis. So 50% of the time I was doing commodity buying, like how traders do. And then the remaining 50% of the time I was just trying to backtest my decision-making using these Python-based frameworks, using linear programming and other aspects. Yeah.
And based on what you know, having learned how to do that and how you've applied it in your role, both as a category manager and now doing your Centre of Excellence role, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more towards the end of the interview around how we see procurement organizations evolving. But do you anticipate that this type of combination of skills will be much more in demand in the future?
100%. And when I started, everything was, let's say, a bit of a learning journey because I had to learn how to code and then implement it. And I guess I would call it as learning inertia, because you had to put in a lot of effort to really translate that code into the use cases, because I think a lot of power is in the use case element, not in the technology. And now I guess that inertia has been removed. You can ask ChatGPT or Copilot and you don't have to worry about the coding. So it comes back to the whole, let's say, imagination of what kind of data I have and what kind of use cases can I run with. And the whole block of automating that using the code is just gone. You can use any LLM today to code it.
Yeah, I love that actually. And I didn't really anticipate to talk about this, but I will dive into it a little bit more because I think it's important for context. I've actually dipped my feet into vibe coding a little bit, and I got Claude actually to code my new website, my new consulting website, not my products and services website, but that's a bit more complex. And I agree that, to your point, any LLM can do the coding now. However, I do still strongly believe, be interesting to get your take on this, that if you know some coding and you know how to write a good prompt in Claude, then that really is a superpower because you can get the work done in a fraction of the time. I mean, it took me longer because I didn't really know what to. I understand a little bit of HTML and CSS, but I wouldn't be able to write it myself, for example. And I got there in the end, but I suspect that I'd have got there a lot sooner with your background or with a software development background.
100%. I mean, I would just count that as an incremental advantage, meaning, yes, if you understand the structure, you may be 20% more efficient. And maybe if you do not have that, let's say, head start, you may have to do more iterations, asking the LLM again to refine it till you get the final product. But like I mentioned, the magic for me lies in the use cases. So you need a lot of procurement creativity these days to get the value out of the data that you have. And I guess that skill will become more and more relevant. And the paths to execution, like I mentioned, you think of a use case, you organize your data set, and the execution is now a bit more faster than it was supposed to be done previously.
Yeah, 100%. So you're still going to need to be able to have the creativity to think through what could be a potential use case for a piece of Python code or a
100%
or a vibe coded app or whatever it might be, or a dashboard that you build in Airtable, whatever the case might be.
Yes.
You need to come up with a use case before you start applying it. And that's always going to be where someone with a creative mind is going to flourish versus someone that, is very much blinkered and thinking in terms of process and compliance only. Yeah. So I follow your LinkedIn posts and you put some pretty meaty stuff out there. And I'd probably say I agree with 70, 80% of what you put out there. But then sometimes I think, that was maybe a little bit stronger. I'm not sure I agree with that. You have particularly some pretty strong opinions around the procurement tech world, and that a lot of it is perhaps marketing hype and potentially a little bit overpriced or not necessary for the typical procurement organization. Can you break that down a little bit and give some context around why you think that?
100%. I think when you see the journey as a category manager, not as a CPO, because CPO I understand from a high level perspective, but these tools, whether it's e-sourcing, spend analysis, contract management, supplier management, etc. When you imagine from a day-to-day workload of a category manager, you would quickly realize that all the shiny features of AI and everybody what talks about are not really getting utilized. What is getting utilized are the basic features. So people want faster ways of launching an e-sourcing project, right? They want a better negotiation experience. While you see what is being sold right now are what I call as vanity features, which have very low adoption rate. So when you break down between what I call as must-have features versus good-to-have features, you would find that most of the procurement requirements can get utilized using basic features. So that 80% block is pretty much the same since many, many years. Same goes for e-sourcing. Same goes for spend analysis, etc. So I'll focus on e-sourcing for now. So the core aspect is, how do I launch my events faster, right? That's where the whole industry is solving the problem on.
Well, and how do you get suppliers to register and participate on the platform as well, I think is the big one too.
100%. How do you do the due diligence? How do you make sure their information is relevant and up to date, etc.? And when you analyze the industry, James, the solutions that are happening, those are very incremental improvements. So your core part is still the same. People fill a form together. They upload an Excel file maybe to create hundreds of line items. Then they invite suppliers and then the invite goes out. There's a technical evaluation. There's a commercial negotiation. The workflows have not changed. On the UI has emerged to be better than, let's say, some of the technologies of 2000. Now, I'm of the opinion, and it goes through some of the experiments that I do on a side basis, is you can now do that vibe code experience and basically build a very basic procurement stack that just works for my use case without spending months into the development. When you analyze the procurement tech stacks of today, they are bloated in terms of there are too many features. So you have to do a lot of integration. You have to do a lot of change management. And that takes your project implementation time from what could have been weeks to, let's say, more than 6 months, 7 months. And I think it just delays the value that whatever we can realize today. I just want my sourcing events to be done faster. So that's one, right? The second, my thought process comes from the fact of, I think there is still a bit of a gap in most of the procurement decks to understand what category managers require. So even today, all the e-sourcing providers will think one sourcing event at a time, right? But as a category manager, I need to see the whole board. Who's doing what? Who's buying? Can I consolidate? Can I team up together? And a lot of value or the leverage that I find in the negotiation by, let's say, pulling in similar demands from other sources is still offline. And it's kind of like ignored fact that a category manager has a job to find levers of negotiation during the sourcing process, which I guess is not considered in today's e-sourcing tool because they're still thinking one RFQ, one RFP at a time. So they're still not looking at the whole board. And these are the kind of experiences when you translate them into use cases and combine with LLM or vibe coding, that becomes really powerful. So I will be very happy to have a very basic e-sourcing suite today, which I can code through LLM, but have this feature of, okay, what are the levers available for negotiation? Just scan the whole entire database and then just tell me, what are the negotiation levers? Volume, demand, price projections, performance issues, etc. Right? And immediately my in-house grown tool is far more powerful than maybe the best-in-class e-sourcing tool out there. And this finding of that the most valuable features are still missing because they are not imagining category manager's journey is still relevant in the spend analysis, contract management, supply management, all the toolings that you see. So to summarize, if you think of the basic, I think we are at a position here where you can code them in-house. And for the most valuable features, we are yet to see a dedicated focus from procurement tech providers to really unlock the next phase of value. That's basically my theory.
Yeah, e-sourcing, and thank you for that. E-sourcing is an interesting one, actually, because I would perhaps push back on the implementation time for an e-sourcing platform because typically speaking, they don't need to connect with an ERP system. And certainly if I look at some of the more modern e-sourcing tools that are out there, the Deepstream, Cotis, Archlet, Lightsource, some of these guys, you can actually implement those in days and weeks rather than months. But I get the broader context that you're saying, especially when it comes to feature bloat. And I think probably more interesting based on your answer is that now that you can, build an MVP using the help of an LLM and maybe a vibe coding app, something like Bolt or Lovable or Cursor or all of these apps that you can use to code your own app, that should then mean that the risk of failure is a lot lower, because if you're going to do that as a pilot and then learn from your mistakes or learn what doesn't work, it should make it a lot easier when you do actually get, because there's going to be pushback, obviously, especially from a company the size of MTN. There's going to be pushback for using a vibe code tool for e-sourcing just from a cybersecurity perspective, right? I mean, let's be realistic. But if you do go then out to the market for some of these more modern UI UX first e-sourcing tools, you should be a lot clearer in terms of what you want, right, from that experience. So I would suspect, from what you've told me, this could be leveraged to reduce the chance of failure or lack of adoption just through learning and reiterating. It makes you be able to fail fast, much, much cheaper and quicker.
100%. And let me put my procurement hat now, right? Let me just step out from my data science role. So when I look at the cost base, right, the license costs are only going up. They're not coming down. Whereas a lot of the code base, if you analyze, or technologies you have analyzed, their core part has remained same. So you have some Magic Quadrant leaders who are running on 2010 technology, maybe. So it's a 15-year-old technology base, and they are doing graphers to make sure they are pretty efficient. That code base is now getting automated, so they don't need that many amount of resources to maintain that, right? So ideally, the licenses cost should come down. And that's what I'm advocating because of this new vibe code scenarios or the automation in the coding. Even if you're going with the market leader today, their license cost should be at least 20-30% cheaper than it was a couple of years ago, because they are also gaining in terms of having less resources to maintain that same code base. So anyway, your decision to fail fast, I think it's moving more internally first than, let's say, before going out with a third-party vendor.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I'm seeing the same thing. I'm seeing license costs increase, and I'm seeing and maybe this is just through sort of advancement in feature and maturity of products as well. I mean, I'll maybe go a bit easy on the procurement tech providers on this one, but I'm seeing that as well, that an app that would have cost maybe $25,000 a couple of years ago is now $50. And as these products mature and as they build their teams and learn from customers, I get that that's then built into the price. But you're right. If you're going to spend that sort of money on tech, you need to be pretty damn sure that it's going to work. And you don't just want to, you don't want to be doing it on a wing and a prayer. And to your earlier answer, then if you can build an MVP using no code or low code applications to test it, maybe in one location, and to reiterate, that gets you there. It should get you to the point where you've got implementation and user adoption a lot faster in the curve, and indeed budget approval. If you look at trying to convince the CFO to give you some money, if you can prove that a pilot case has worked, that should also then help to facilitate that if we view it logically.
100%. And the definition of, let's say, the success, how do these tools get justified, right? So you often see two pitches only. One, it'll help you get more savings. B, you'll probably get a 10x increase in your cycle time and the productivity. When it comes about savings, I think we are pushing towards a case where the meat has to come onto the table. They cannot just rely upon a projection. There has to be skin in the game now. So when I have to invest into a procurement tech tool, today I am taking all the risks, right? Because although the PowerPoint presentation do mention 10x return on terms of ROI, but there's no contractual binding. So the whole business model of success-based or outcome-based pricing has to come across in some shape or form when the investment sizes are of ticket size like 100K, 200K, even 300K per year kind of a scenario. The risk has to be shared. It just cannot sit alone on CPO side. So we would probably see that kind of a model becoming more prominent, that it's more gain share to a certain extent rather than, let's say, only a projection, but without any commitment from the procurement tech provider side.
Gain share is an interesting one because what you say makes a lot of sense, especially if we look at e-sourcing or if we look at spend analytics. But then if I was a CEO or a co-founder of a procurement tech company and I was trusting my customer to do their side of the bargain, what if he suddenly has to downsize his team by 20%? Or what if there's a geopolitical event that means they're all hands on deck doing something else? It's very, very difficult in that sense to be able to accept the risk behind something where you're totally dependent on a third party that's bound by a lot of other externalities. And let's face it, in most businesses, procurement often doesn't have that much influence. It is what it is, right? I mean, let's not sugarcoat it. So I get it. And I think I agree with you. I think procurement tech companies do need to shoulder a bit more risk, but I'm not sure I would easily find one that would take a gain share agreement. Maybe I'll be if anyone's listening to this and you're a procurement tech founder, write me if you're interested in gain share agreements. Let's see if anyone comes out of the woodwork. Anyway, so we've talked a bit about MVP and vibe coding and bringing, a basic app without unnecessary features onto the market, which kind of segues nicely into your side project, which is called Supernegotiate. So you've been spending a lot of your spare time building your own tools as a bit of a side project. So walk me through what gave you the idea and what you've built and some of the lessons that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, thank you. For me, Supernegotiate comes from the fact, the reason I started this out is if someone is starting afresh today in the world of procurement, it can become quite overwhelming, right? Yeah, a lot of acronyms are being thrown around, and then it almost looks like procurement is a very bureaucratic process, a lot of templates to follow, a lot of rules to follow. And you and me both know when you basically get rid of all acronyms, it's just a logical process flow. Maybe you have to apply your common sense. So I want to do, let's say, share primarily with, let's say, anyone who's starting out in procurement today, that these are the reference materials available. So that's how Supernegotiate started. So I built out some lessons on basics of procurement processes, spend analysis. Then I went into the negotiation aspect, because I think when you go into the world of let's say 5 years from now, I think a lot of soft skills would come into more demand, a lot of technical skills would come into more demand, and all the logical stuff, which I calling as common sense or admin and operational stuff, would either get outsourced or get automated. So at the end of the day, we will be working with people who are probably top 1% in their art, if I use it once. So let's say in the category, these are the top 1% who knows category in and out. These are the top 1% spend analysis professionals, or let's say top 1% in negotiation aspect. So in my view, we're headed towards that kind of a world. And Supernegotiate is just a path for people to get to that top 1% skill set as fast as possible. So I started with as a knowledge sharing content community. And what I've quickly realized is a lot of time today is being spent discussing tools, but not a lot of time is spent today in discussing use cases. So we are very good at identifying who are the top procurement tech providers for a particular class, but we rarely talk about, okay, what will you do after getting that tool, right? Because when you look at it from the other side, procurement today is generating a lot of data. Doesn't matter whichever tool you select, at the end of the day, you will be generating so many data points. And then if you're not utilizing those data points, then you're missing out on significant amount of, let's say, money on the table kind of a scenario. So you will end up having someone who will be asked to see, guys, can you look at this data and find me patterns on cost saving or compliance issues or consolidation opportunities, anything under the sun, right? And that's basically I'm trying to do at Supernegotiate, basically develop that mindset of, okay, we have the tool, what's next? The use cases element. And I want CPOs to become CPOs, not become CIOs, because I see a lot of CPOs talking about databases in the IT language in terms of what's the architecture behind it. And I try to simplify this, say, let's not be overwhelmed with the procurement technology today, because at the end of the day, after the tool, we have to do our work again. And then let us simplify things. Let's try to minus the marketing hype. And then let me show you a simpler version of, if you forget the marketing hype, it's possible for you to have a basic version which works probably the same as the most shiny tool that you're looking at. Again, remove the hype of the technology. Let's focus on the procurement aspect. And that's basically the intent behind Supernegotiate.
So do you think one day this could be a standalone business in either as an advisory or as a sort of app building or tool building kind of venture?
So I'll be over honest on this one, right? My vision for Supernegotiate is only two. I want to just nail those two experiments. So every tool I'm building or experiment I'm doing, I call them as ideas, right? Or the experiments like I mentioned. I have only two use cases that I want to crack at Supernegotiate. One is, I think a lot of CPOs are spending time, like I mentioned, on tools today, right? So, and there are barriers because these tools requires time and energy and resources. So not everyone has that kind of resources available. Maybe they have less people, maybe they have less budget, etc. So how do you enable tool-less digitization? Meaning I don't want to invest or own any tech platform today, but I want to get the benefits of the digitization, right? So do I really have to have an e-sourcing tool in order to digitize my sourcing process? My opinion is everyone should not have that kind of a tool. So can we have one centralized platform where, like Twitter or like LinkedIn, I don't own the tech of LinkedIn. Nobody owns the tech of LinkedIn, right? It's centralized, but it's available for everyone. And that's the journey I'm enabling with Supernegotiate. Everything basic, but available for everyone at the end of the day. So I don't want to enable any specialized suites. If you want to run basic e-sourcing, off you go. This is like Twitter, and then you can run your e-sourcing. So it's digitization for everyone. It has so many advantages, James. I don't have a vendor lock-in. I don't have annual recurring expenses. I'm not spending time on integrations. It just makes so much sense. So that's one, let's say, dream project of mine. How do I enable digital procurement benefits for people who don't want to be investing into tools? The second aspect, like I mentioned, Supernegotiate would be to develop that 1% talent. So I want to develop category experts. So I have knowledge of few categories in raw material procurement, etc. Right? I want to develop spend analysis champions, and I want to develop negotiation champions. So these are the three areas which I know. But like I mentioned, I imagine a scenario where procurement people are just spending the time, 90% of the time on their expertise. So I would bring in James to have opinion on just set up my procurement tech, and James doesn't have to go through the admin of create the e-sourcing event, invite vendors, do meetings, do the vendor due diligence, etc. All that admin aspect has to be removed, whether via automation or whether via e-sourcing. So these are the two projects that I want to crack, and then we'll see where Supernegotiate goes. But yeah, that's basically my motivation of doing work at Supernegotiate. So on the tool side, I do vibe coding and I put stuff out there for people to use. And the second side, I do my content creation just to make sure if somebody wants to learn spend analysis or negotiation, they have some lectures or online videos available from a procurement manager perspective.
I love that. And it's if you haven't yet, check out Gaurav's YouTube channel, actually, Supernegotiate. There's some great stuff on there. Okay, so we touched on it a little bit in what you were talking about with Supernegotiate and around your vision that it's going to be a sort of winner takes all, in that the experts in certain areas of procurement, be it spend analytics, be it digital, be it process, be it storytelling and business partnering, it's going to be more and more of a Pareto, that the top ones are going to be retained and are going to be really in-demand experts, and the ones, towards the bottom of the pile, let's be honest, probably going to struggle to further their career as time goes on. So if I look into the future, 5 years from now, what do you think procurement teams will look like? Will they be bigger or will they be smaller? And what do you think will be the most sought after roles?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, right? So one of the favorite metric every, let's say, consulting agent or the consulting company tries to measure procurement productivity on is spend per FTE, meaning, how many millions or billions of dollars your full-time resources handling, right? And then in my view, if I follow that same metric, I am expecting that spend per FDE number to become 5x or 10x in future. And primarily the reason is we would probably reduce 80 to 90% of admin workload.
Yeah.
So it's funny you asked me this, because that day I was just trying to break down right from the granular step of generating a purchase requisition till the first purchase order that goes out, including the sourcing. There are about 80 to 90 steps, James, in the whole value chain where it's pure admin work from system mapping perspective. And I'm not counted the negotiation aspect. So in this whole value chain, the only valuable aspect is the negotiation, right? This is where you basically generate most amount of value. So negotiation contains probably 3 or 4 sub-activities, but there are 80, 90 odd activities where you're just clicking things on the system. So I expect all those admin activities to move on. In my view, you would only have, like I mentioned, top 1% experts in their respective fields who will be not, let's say, very tech savvy in terms of spending times on system, but they will be extremely good at what they do in their respective domains. So soft skills and technical skills, not digital skills per se, because all the digital aspect will be handled by the agents per se. So you will have your own chatbots to do stuff for you. And that's how I believe your AI agents comes into the picture. So all your tools such as N8, N, or the co-pilots would be there for you to do the automation aspect. Like, do this for me, do this for that. Like, I can ask my agent to create e-sourcing for me. These are the vendors and etc. And the agent does it for me. I don't have to log on to any platform. So for me, the future of digital procurement is UI less, agent driven. But I will only be doing my negotiation or spend analysis or supplier risk management more usual than not. So my spend per FTE will increase significantly.
I would concur with that. Yeah, I certainly think we're going to be seeing smaller teams. But then, do you not also think that we'll probably have roles that don't manage any spend? I'm thinking maybe having a marketing expert in the team, just for because when you ask any procurement professional, everyone says that it's harder to engage with stakeholders than it is to negotiate with suppliers. That's just fact, right? We have more power and jurisdiction over our suppliers typically than we do over internal stakeholders within the business. You know, they don't report to us, not even in a dotted line in most senses. So I do think that storytelling and influence and persuasion and business partnering is going to become even more important as you rightly predicted. You know, if 90% of the transactional and administrative work can be eliminated or automated through technology, that's going to free up time. And not all of that time is going to be spent on category management. You're going to need some resource. You can have the best category managers in the world, but if they can't sell their strategy internally, you're still going to be where we are today and struggling to get influence within the business.
100%. So a lot has to change and probably will change, right? So I'm just currently researching an article and probably writing my thoughts on is how does procurement look like in AI first world? And RFPs, which is like request for proposals, do not fit into that kind of a word at all. So when you break down the today's process, right, there will be a scope of work, there will be technical evaluation, commercial evaluation, and then certainly there will be presentation to recommend the final wonder. We do not see, in my view, that kind of a working style in procurement world, which is AI first. So a lot of your process, James, would not be RFP driven. It would probably similar to like you and me having this conversation, right? So I will have 6 or 7 meetings with the suppliers where we will try to understand what are you offering. And then parallelly, they are picking and choosing the features that we like. So this is already a very big deviation from requiring a scope of work document and sorting into a e-sourcing tool. That style has to go away. And then secondly aspect, and I'm going operationally into it, this whole technical evaluation component would probably be phased out. What you basically need, having conversation with suppliers to understand. And we are moving towards a proof of concept kind of a sourcing process. So if you analyze today and when you look at from third-party perspective, it almost looks like very funny to me because you're committing multi-million-dollar contracts based upon PowerPoint presentations and PDF documents, putting a lot of trust in terms of what has been submitted, right? In normal world or in the AI first world, you would want to arrive at that decision as fast as possible, but your main commitment would only come after a proof of concept, which when you go into the manufacturing world today or automotive procurement today, they commit their contracts upfront because of what the suppliers are submitting in the RFP process. So we would go into proof of concept kind of process in sourcing rather than an RFP-based tendering process. That's what I see right now. And that would change the way you manage your category, because you would then try to work with the vendors who have delivered proof of concept successfully rather than trying out new vendors every now and then. Because the main limitation about, let's say, the current RFP process is when you're dealing with small companies who are more innovative, they do not have capacity to participate in month or 2 month or 6 month long RFP process. They do not have that kind of resources available.
Yeah.
So the longer is your sourcing time, you will end up working with legacy vendors. Shorter is your sourcing time, you will be able to experiment with better technologies. And I think in the world of AI first, you would tend to shorten your sourcing time so that you can work with new technologies, new companies better, and then have those engagements for 5 years, 6 years kind of a scenario. But yeah, the RFP process doesn't fit into that kind of a working style.
That's really insightful. I'd never actually considered that before in terms of the future of sourcing and how that might be impacted in terms of supplier selection and whether the incumbent would have a natural benefit or not. But it's, really interesting listening to you explain how that could work. Okay, I'm just conscious of the time, Gaurav. Need to wrap this up. So if anyone would like to get in touch with you, where's the best place that we can send them?
I am super active on LinkedIn, and they can also go to supernegotiate.com, but I'm very happy to have a chat about anything procurement anytime.
And I will link to all of that in the show notes for anyone listening. Been a pleasure, Gaurav. Hope we can get you back again sometime soon and keep doing what you're doing. Appreciate you, man.
James, thank you so much for this opportunity. Always a pleasure speaking to you.
So I hope that's given you a little bit of food for thought while you're at the gym or walking the dog or doing whatever you do when you listen to these podcasts, because Gaurav has some really unique ideas on where he thinks the future's going, and with his background as well, with being able to build as well as, manage categories and when work in Centre of Excellence role as he currently does. So hope you enjoyed this one. We'll be back again same time next month. I'm actually going in September to an Agentic AI conference in London, and I will possibly even do a solo episode in September to share some of the outputs and takeaways that I got from that event, because it's definitely what the buzz seems to be all about these days. So watch out for that one, same time next month. Until then, take care wherever you are, and bye for now.